Check, chickadee check. How am I coming through? Seems to be all right. Check. Some of those checks didn't register. We call those Valentina hook checks, but they go down great with the analysts on Twitter. How are we doing? It's your boy Jack Slack, Fights Gone By podcast, coming at you from a comfy cushion that I've placed down in the corner of the room. Got my mug of tea. So this is a different sort of podcast we're going to be doing today. And by different sort, I mean it might only last like 10 minutes and then we'll do another one in a couple of days. But I decided that while there's nothing going on, I could and am doing the stuff where you go like Fedor, Nogueira, Crow Cop. Here's the greatest hits, which is stuff that, we are all guilty of doing when there's slow weeks, let alone no weeks. But I thought this is actually a really good chance for me to catch up on some stuff that I know that happened and I missed, or that I saw bits of but didn't really give my fullest attention. And that can happen, I am but one man, and when you get carried away covering the main event scene and so on, you tend to, stuff's happening in the background, but you don't necessarily give your view on it or talk about it at length. And the one that we've got loads of stuff that I want to do. I want to do Tafik Musayev and his little run through Rising and the stuff he did in 2018, 2019. PFL, I really have had trouble watching. It's quite hard to find somewhere to watch it here in the UK. So I've managed to get a hold of some of their events that have already happened, and now I can start to catch up. But I've been wanting to check them out for a while, and I've been hearing good things about some of their champions. But today I thought I'd do one that's a little bit more mainstream. Certainly, with the hardcore MMA fans, it's mainstream. But something that I was aware of happening, and I don't think I gave it the full attention that it deserved through 2019, early 2020, and that was the rise of Geoff Neal. Geoff Neal, obviously a welterweight in the UFC's welterweight division, and he's really come into prominence with his last win, which was knockout of Mike Perry. Obviously, Mike Perry, bit of a meme fighter, but still a talented guy, a big hitter, and can take a tremendous shot. So Neal smoking him in, what was it, like a minute? Really didn't go unnoticed. People were very aware of Geoff Neal after that happened. But he's had, 5 or 6 fights in the UFC? Well, if you include Dana White's Contender Series, he's had one there as well. But he's had a good little run, and he presents some interesting questions, and I think there's some interesting questions to be raised about him. Firstly, if you didn't know, apparently until the Mike Perry win, he was still working as a server at some Texas barbecue chain. So, if you are like me and you've been using the lockdown to post theory to Sam Alvey, well, Geoff Neal might be your man. He's going to win the welterweight title and unionize the fighters. But he got into the UFC like so many guys do nowadays, got in through Dana White's Contender Series. Actually had a loss to Kevin Holland shortly before that, back in January 2017. I haven't watched that one, but man, Kevin Holland? the world's most difficult to watch, the UFC's most difficult to watch fighter. But he got into Dana White's Contender Series in 2017, and that was July, and he fought Chase Walden and TKO'd him. Since then, he fought Brian Camozzi, the younger brother of Chris Camozzi, Frank Camacho, Bilal Muhammad, Nico Price, Mike Perry, and he finished all of them except Bilal Muhammad, which is something that's going to come up when we start to talk about his style. But that tells you a lot about what he does well, and he's he punches people and he stops them. But he's a southpaw, and he really does bring that southpaw double attack. We always talk about Crow Cop as like the go-to example, partly because it's good for search engine optimization or whatever. People go, oh, Crow Cop, yeah, I'm very interested. But partly because Crow Cop is just the perfect example. Basically all he did was left straights and left body kicks and high kicks. He didn't even like kicking the legs. He said that, if you kick a leg and you kick a leg wrong, you break your foot or your shin, and that's you done for the fight. Whereas if you kick the body or the head, it only takes one to put them away, and you might kick an elbow or something, but you're not having to do 10 or 11 to get some damage done like you are low kicks. And of course, the southpaw double attack or triple attack or whatever you want to call it, is just showing the opponent one thing, being very honest with them, saying, I'm going to hit you with this left straight. And when they start to adapt to it, you go, okay, well, because you're bringing your hand in to parry it, I'm going to start kicking you in the head. or upside the head with my round kick because your hand's coming in, or because you're slipping to the elbow side of the left straight. I'm going to start throwing up the high kick, and then you put them in the spot where they go, oh fuck, high kick, got to have that hand out and braced and high, and you're going, okay, well if your hand's up there and it's braced and you're standing nice and upright, I'm going to go back to throwing the left straight down the center, and you just fastball them. One at a time, sniping the dude, and that's what Krokop did. That's Roberto Suldich, who's in KSW. The Tamer brothers are pretty good at it. It's really, I don't want to say basic, in terms of like, it's fundamental. It's not basic, is what I'd say. You're not going to be able to go out and just do it. But if you get really good at it, they're your ones and twos. You're doing one strike at a time, and it's giving the other guy a real headache dealing with it. The other thing about Neal that I really like, and something that helps him so much in this lower weight class, is he can hit decently, but the fact that he's not afraid to open up and throw his left hand. So many guys, and especially the better you get at striking, or the better you get as a technician, or the more you think of yourself as a technician, the easier it is to sit back and do fuck all. Think George St. Pierre or Rory McDonald when they meet people who don't let them establish the jab. They go, well, I'm not going to start throwing real punches until I've really established this jab. People like Neal, the good thing about them is that they come out and they go, here's a left straight down the pipe. Oh, it didn't land. Here's another one. And they're not. It kind of opens you up to counters, but that's always the thing. You've got to move your hands to make stuff happen, and you are creating openings for counters, but you just got to hope that you get there first and do your best to get there first. And Neal's very good at just opening up right from the start of the match. There isn't an awful lot of fanning around in a Geoff Neal fight, which is something that I think surprises people, because it seems like the more... I'm going with expectations here, but even as someone who studies technical strikers, it seems like the more technical someone is touted as being, the less other stuff there is going on. People go, Jack, I love this guy, he's really technical. And you're 3 minutes into the first round going, yeah, he really is. There's not a lot going on here. Something that I noticed just through all of Neal's fights is that he throws combinations, but it really has that, like, if he goes 1, 2, 3, 2, right jab, left straight, right hook, left straight, and it'll really have that ba-bam, ba-bam, that heavy iambic, I don't know. Poetry nerds, get in the comments and tell me, but you have that offbeat, and the second beat is the one that carries the power, and his lead hand is almost a throwaway, even when he's throwing the right hook. You really notice that it's just like jab left, hook left. He just wants to force feed that hand down the center, and the other punches are just sort of like by the way, which is something that we're going to get into when we talk about like stuff that could give him trouble. But I mean, let's just run through these wins. Chase Walden, I think that was he was throwing jabs and left straights, and he was going 1-2, 1-2, and Walden tried to take him down. He just his takedown defense is very I'd say that it's like what you expect from a good regional prospect. He's been trained to counter wrestle, but not in the way that, like, it doesn't have the tact and the levels to it, the depth, the umami. No, the depth of like a Jose Aldo or someone like that, where they've got just answer after answer, and if you shoot a takedown on them, no matter how much you feel you're getting the initiative on them, they're going, no, we're gonna fight this battle in this form of takedown. Just take that single leg there, Geoff Neal's very much like push the head, dig the underhooks, and that was really noticeable in his recent UFC ones. It's just dig both underhooks, drop both hands when you see the other guy coming in. But against Chase Walden, you saw him just moving the head around, trying to force trying to lift the head up out of the single, trying to force the head over for the outside single, high crotch, whatever, attack the back stuff. But the change up came. He went 1-2, 1-2 throughout the entire fight, and then he went 1-1, and then round the side with a hooking overhand left and knocked him down, which was lovely. Brian Camozzi was another one who's just sort of out at the mercy of the left straight, having horrible trouble with that. Frank Camacho, again, like the left straight and the left high kick. And the way that Geoff Neal throws his left straight is quite interesting to me, because he, you get guys who are sharpshooters with the left hand or the rear hand as a southpaw, and they go like all the way through. They just shoot a long left straight, and that's it on its own. And then you get guys who step in and square up. It's the difference between, like, I don't know, I've heard people call it the double hip or something like that. But it's the difference between rotating your hips to square, your hips and shoulders to square, and rotating your hips and shoulders all the way through to like, in Japanese they call it gyaku hanmi, reverse half facing. And Geoff Neal only really goes to square. He gets to square and he steps in on his man. And that means that he can follow up with the right hand, reset his hips, and throw the left hand again. That can be problematic because it does mean that you're a bit more open to the left hook. Every time you square up, the orthodox left hook is a bit more of a threat. And especially because I've noticed that Neal drops his right hand a lot to load up for the right hook again. Sip of tea, excuse me. But the squaring of the shoulders is the thing that you're getting the opponent to look for, and then you throw up the high kick when you see him either parrying, which removes the hand from between the kick and the head, or slipping, which means he's taking his head down towards your leg. And if you watch those kicks in the Camacho fight, the Perry fight, I think he did it to Nico Price as well, did it to Bilal Muhammad. But, this is inside baseball nerd shit. But if you're throwing a kick to go through, you put your hip through, and it's like a punch. You go with your shoulder, and your shoulder whips the punch through. You throw your shoulder in, punch goes with it. If you're throwing a good kick, like a power kick, you throw your hip, and the kick follows it. If you're throwing a kick, that's throwing a kick through something. That's if you want to hurt it. If you're throwing a kick to the target, which is a bit more, you see it in karate a lot, and a lot more in sports where they like to chamber the leg high, like taekwondo. But kicking to the target is really good for, like, if you're throwing the kick up high to come in with punches afterwards, you're throwing a fake or part of a combination. You're not trying to just take the dude's head off or kick through his body. You kick to the target and you hold the hip back a bit, and the knee often goes ahead of the hip in its path. So when you get to the target, you can't really do much with it. Like, there's not much more on the kick, but it means that you could throw like a right high kick and immediately come down with a right straight. Think like Machida used to do it a lot. That's how he dropped Rashad in their fight the first time. And obviously the other Machida does it too, Chinzo, that's his name. And Andy Hook used to be amazing with it. He'd go southpaw, or he'd fight southpaw most of the time, and he'd throw the left high kick, and while he was in the air, his knee would just be going so that the kick went to the opponent's forearm, not through it, and then he'd bring his shoulder forward and throw his left straight down the center, and he'd be knocking dudes like Ray Safo down on one leg. But that's the idea of kicking to the target. And when you watch Geoff Neal's kicks, they're not like Crow Cop, beautiful. Well, not a lot of people have a high kick like Crow Cop, where you can do like perfect mid-level kick but above the opponent's head. If you watch him do it to, like, even Alex Emelianenko, he kicks him and his whole hip's going through, and you're like, what the fuck are your hips made of? Do you even have hips? Do you not just have, like, he's not just jelly from one thigh to the other across the crotch. But if you watch Neal land his kicks on like Camacho, he throws them very much to he throws them to the target, and the target is also off to his left. He very rarely throws his hip in with it. He's just bringing his shin up to clack you as you're slipping to the side. And so many guys do the slip and parry. You can't just parry, you can't just slip. They do both, and it feels really belt and braces. But if the high kick's coming, you're not only throwing your head into it, but you're also taking your hand away from it too. If you're fighting a really good high kicker, firstly, don't. But secondly, if you're going to slip, I really like slipping with the hand high. Actually, Fedor versus Crow Cop is an amazing example where, and even in that fight, Fedor fought perfectly and still got like wobbled by left straights and things. But that's a fight where he's using the long barrier, which is, you get up on one leg, you do a shin check with your rear leg, and you make a barrier out of basically your rear arm and rear leg, and you're bringing the lead hand across to block, because good blocking of kicks tends to be done with the far hand. You have the near hand there as the shield, and then you come across with your other hand and you take the stank off the kick so that you're not getting your arm broken. But if you watch Fedor versus Crow Cop, he's slipping punches while on one leg. It's fucking incredible. But anyway, sorry, kicking to the target is what we're talking about. That's what he does. Throws the left straight, gets the guy dipping, throws that left kick up, and he really doesn't commit his hips to it much. He just throws the shin up to like ding the guy. Like the ultimate example of that is like BJ Penn versus Diego Sanchez, because BJ Penn couldn't throw a kick to save his life, but by doing that, like just throwing the shin up, knowing the opponent's going to put their head on it, you can cause so many problems for them. Because you don't have to kick well to hurt someone with a kick. It's a leg. It's like, what, twice, 3 times the weight of an arm? Well, for some of you nerds out there, like 3 times. For me, probably like 1.5 times. But been a lot of curls going on while we're in lockdown. But something that I was noticing about Neal, and something that I think is going to be really interesting, like I was thinking prospective matchups for him, and I really like the idea. Oh no, I don't really like the idea. Depends if I want to see him lose. No, you can't make a bad matchup at the top end of that division, but I like the idea of him versus Vicente Luque, even though Luke's in a little bit of a different place, like momentum and streak-wise. But Luke is really the kind of guy that I think would be quite a test for Neal, because Luke is the kind of guy who will let you flatten his nose with punches, but every time you hit him in the head, whether he's like looking at the ceiling with his head jacked back or not, he's going to be countering with a left hook immediately, and I think that's the thing that's going to give Geoff Neal real trouble. And I've seen it give him trouble a couple of times from different sort of situations, and they tend to be like haphazard or accidental or just momentary, and the other guy doesn't really pick up or doesn't really have the skills to do that. You know, it's one thing me being like, the left hook's going to be a real problem for this guy, and then you bring me some guy who doesn't have a left hook, and I'm going, well, we've got 2 months to teach you a left hook. But if you've got someone with a really good counter left hook, I think that's going to be trouble for Geoff Neal, because he squares up so much on that left straight, and he steps in so close. You know, he doesn't shoot it very long. He shoots it to get in and continue throwing. You know, you see him double up with the left straight a lot. You know, the old Pacquiao. So I think I think the left hook's going to be trouble. He had trouble with Camacho when he pushed him against the fence, and Camacho was hurt, and he stepped in to like throw hands, you know, to finish the job, so to speak. And Camacho dinged him with a left hook, and he stumbled and took a step back and let Camacho off the fence, which was the smart thing to do if you get dinged going in like that. But if you remember Vicente Luque versus Stephen Thompson did a wonderful job when they were doing it in 1s and 2s out of range. But whenever Luke backed up to I'll get told off either way in the comments. But whenever Luque backed up to the fence, he'd cover up, and Thompson would go, "Oh right, I'm going to have him now," and he'd step in and get clipped by a counter left hook or a cross counter across the top of his left straight, and then he'd go, "Oh no," and step back out of range. Once the guy's on the fence, it's very tempting to step in and overcommit, and the left hook is just perfect there for many fighters, especially southpaws. But another example was Nico Price, who, now, in fairness, Nico Price does everything in a crazy spaz of motion, and I was just thinking while I was watching this fight, I love Nico Price. There's something comical about like his build and the way he moves, but also his fights are super entertaining ass fights. I think it's probably because he can tie his shoelaces while he's standing up. He's got these ridiculous arms and like no torso at all. It's just very wide and very short. But in that fight, he stepped forward and hit Neal with a left hook. It was from a southpaw stance, I think. Hit him with a left hook as Neal's right hand was going down, and he was stepping in with the left straight. And he dropped him. In fact, they both dropped each other, which was just chaos. And then Neal moved in on him on the fence, and Price caught him out of that in a wild exchange again. I think on the right side of Neal's head. The other one that I think is going to be interesting for Neal is there's 2 things that I really think are going to be interesting for him: bodywork and cage work. Because cage work, once you get to the top 2 or 3 of that division, it's just, we want to hump you against the cage, mate. You know, Usman and Covington are going to just put you to the fence and keep dropping on your hips over and over again, and you're going to get up, but you're not going to get away. And I have seen Neal put himself on the fence too much. If you've seen, his corner man goes mental about it. He's like, whenever he comes back to the corner, he goes, "Don't you put your fucking back on that cage, or I'll come in there and rip your face off." He does tend to put his back on the fence, and especially once you get into a clinch with him, you seem to be able to push him to the fence. Like, he'll go there, and there's the Jose Aldo sort of thing where you go to the fence to prop yourself up and fight off a single leg, but Neal seems to just got sort of pushed there from upright clinches, and that's, it's one thing for that to be happening against like the Frank Camachos, Brian Camozis, Bilal Muhammad's of the division, but they're not guys who just thrive in that position. If you start letting that happen against Usman and Covington, that's really bad. Or even Maia, But the other one's bodywork, which is quite interesting because Bilal Muhammad was spazzing out all over the place in the first round of their fight, but had real success with front kicks to the body and body punches. And his body punches were just sort of like thrown out there. But the body kicks and punches seemed to slow Neal down a bit, but Neal was still much faster than him throughout the bout. But the front kick to the body, Neal had no answer for. I didn't see him parry and step in on a kick. I didn't see him withdraw and come back in. There were no, as far as I can recall, there were no counters off the front kicks, and each one connected and seemed to bother him. Body punches, I thought Bilal was just, he's doing like the wide swing to the body as a lead, and that's kind of dangerous because you're dropping your hands against a guy who has a wickedly fast left straight and is just waiting for you to open up so that he can throw the left straight. What I do like the idea of is when Neal squares up after throwing his left hand, returning with body punches as the counter, and especially because Neal, we're talking about exploitable habits and Neal squaring up and dropping his right hand when he throws his left straight, but sometimes he'll throw his left straight and then he'll bring his both hands high and lean in on the opponent, expecting the counter. Habits are just things that happen a lot. They're not things that happen every time. But when he throws the left straight and he's conscious of a return, he covers up with the double forearm guard high. And I think that's an amazing time to catch him in the body off that. Because, if you're going for the left hook to the head on the counter each time he steps in with the left straight, you're going to catch him sometimes. But if you're going to the body, you'll catch him when he's got his hands down and he's making defensive errors. But you'll also catch him when he's got his hands high and he's making defensive over compensations. So I'm looking at these UFC rankings, and they're always quite interesting because they're decided by a panel of Muppets. But you got Geoff Neal in at 12, and it's interesting. I think, this is the case with almost anyone who's ranked. There's a few people above him that I think he beat quite handily. There's people all around him that I think could be troubling. What the fuck is Conor McGregor doing as the 14th ranked welterweight in the world? Oh, and we've got Nate Diaz and Anthony Pettis in here. That's embarrassing. And we've got Robbie Lawler, who hasn't fought in like 2 years, and Tyron Woodley, who also hasn't fought in like 2 years. What a mess these rankings are. But if we go to the middle portion of the division, or the rankings rather, the part that's actually active and actually welterweights, you've got some interesting matchups for him. I think Rafael Dos Anjos is a guy who could give him trouble because of the footwork, the pressure, putting Neal on the fence, the counter shots and the body work particularly, because, if you move in on Geoff Neal, he's going to throw the left straight. And then, if you can deal with the left straight, either by slipping or taking it on the fucking head or covering up and returning, then you can start working. And if you can move him to the fence through that, I think that's quite an interesting matchup. Dos Anjos obviously undersized at the class still, and definitely on the downward trend in his career, but I think that's a winnable fight for Dos Anjos. I really like that matchup. Who else we got? Michael Chiesa. You got again, like every Michael Chiesa fight, you've got a polar opposite in styles there. I think you'd get to test Geoff Neal's takedown defense a lot and see if that sort of dig the underhooks and stuff it holds up. But then I don't know if Chiesa has the hands to trouble him if he does just like drop his hands and try and deal with the strike with the takedown. But Chiesa is so big for that class that'd be very interesting. Damian Maia again is an interesting one because I've mentioned him already, but because I've seen Neal put himself on the fence so much. I wonder, that's Maia's whole game. Get to the fence, try and lock the hands around the guy, throw him past, get on his back. I think Maia is at the stage where, he's not at all a threat on the feet. He'll throw the left straight occasionally, but I think we're very much into the old man's fights section of his career. I think probably Bellator when his contract comes up. But it's not really a division where you can do that old man fight shit, It's not like light heavyweight and heavyweight where there just aren't very many talents. So as soon as you go to Bellator, maybe you have to fight Javi Ayaya, whatever his name is. You can still people can pretend that you're the best, one of the best in the world. For Maia, I think if he goes welterweight in Bellator, there's that's actually a killer weight class in Bellator. Anyway, sorry, we're talking about Geoff Neal. Stephen Thompson, god damn, would that be a fun fight. Two guys who shoot straight and knock people down a lot. I think it'd be very interesting to see what Neal could do with someone as evasive as Thompson, because his style, while straight shooting and considered technical, he's an aggressive guy, and some of his this links in with the squaring up stuff, but some of his movement after exchanges hasn't been stellar to me. Like sometimes he'll do a nice little duck out and turn the corner and reset or angle out on the opponent. Other times he's just like bam 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 bam, and then the exchange ends, but he's still sort of there. I think it'd be very interesting to see what his feet can do against someone like Thompson. Leon Edwards is... That's a good one. That's a good one. Because, that could be Leon Edwards turns up and tries to wrestle you. But I think on the feet he could give Leon Edwards a lot of trouble. Leon Edwards, if you watched him against Dos Anjos and Luke, dangerous counter strikers, he used lots of feints just to get him swinging at air. I think he'd probably do the same with Geoff Neal. Whether it will work or not is, the real question. You got Nate Diaz in these rankings, and I'm disgusted, firstly, but also fun enough fight if you think about it. A couple of southpaws. I've already said I like body hitting against Neal and counter left hooks. So yeah, the counter left 1-2 is the Nate Diaz go-to. Cover up 1-2, but that'd be his left hand. So yeah, you got some stuff there that could be interesting, and the pace, and of course the fact that Diaz can take a horrible beating. Yeah, and then Conor McGregor, of course, top welterweight, Conor McGregor. That'd be fun. But, when you get into the top end, like Colby Covington, Tyron Woodley, that's quite early for Neal at this point. Jorge Masvidal. I guess, it probably remains to be seen. He's probably 1 or 2 fights away from, like, the top guys. But he's in a really good spot, and I didn't really cover him when it was happening, but he's... really fun, and it's the same sort of tools. That it's that real Crocop thing where you're going, I have the problem, it's up to you if you can answer it. It's the complete opposite of like a really adaptive fighter who brings different tools to different opponents. Neal is like Crocop, where he's just going, well, if you can deal with this, then I'm in trouble, but I don't think you can. And then shooting the left straight and the left high kick. So I've rambled about Geoff Neal for a bit there, but I just thought it was that's what I've been doing today, just watching some Geoff Neal fights, so I thought I'd have a chat about it. We'll be back at various points through the week and the coming weeks, because the lockdown's going on forever, talking about various other stuff that I didn't really talk about at the time, but is interesting, or that I'm catching up on, like PFL stuff. But anyway, this mini podcast has been brought to you by the Fights Gone By podcast. If you want to support the Patreon, support the podcast, get in on the extra stuff we do for the Patreon boys, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. Also, go and check out that Big Nog Filthy Casuals guide, because it got buried by the algorithm, and fuck the algorithm. And the UFC is now releasing tons of Big Nog fights. It's almost like the intern is fucking with me. Anyway, I'm your boy Jack Slack. Geoff Neal's left straight bless.